Okay, and we're going to get started. Uh, Today, we're going to be talking about the NACDA website or NACDA portal, a tour of varying data on aging resources. And all of these data resources are available from ICPSR and NACDA, our aging archive at ICPSR. And my name is Catherine Lavender, and I'm the data project manager for NACDA. Okay, so let's get started. The theme for Love Data Week is whose data is it anyway? And I was thinking about this and I have developed this presentation to go along with this theme. And really the short answer is it's everyone's. ICPSR is a consortium, so there are many working pieces within it, and we operate under teams, federally funded projects, and other formal long-term or temporary structures based on member funding, contracts, and grants. And if you're new to ICPSR, you might come to our website and feel like you don't know where to start. So I thought I might show you some things, how to navigate the site, and how to interpret some of the different data resources that we host. Our key goal is to be stewards of data and to preserve and share data for long-term use. And so the data we host are available for secondary analysis, and for the most part, they're considered public goods. So if you're on the ICPSR website and you're starting to do a search and you want to find some of the NACDA data on aging data, you would go here, go to your search, and on the left-hand side, view the thematic collections. And then I'm circling here the National Archive of Computerized Data on Aging. That's one way to find NACDA's resources from the main ICPSR site. Because when you search from the ICPSR site, you are getting all of ICPSR's results. So that includes all of our funded projects and the members' data. NACDA has been around for more than 40 years, and I like to call us just the Aging Archive because ICPSR has a lot of acronyms and a lot of them start with NA. But we're part of ICPSR and we're funded by the National Institute on Aging. And so all of our data are available at no cost. For the majority of data are available at no cost. Really, all that's required is registration, and it's mostly quantitative data. And our website, the short URL is nacda-aging.org. So you might be wondering, okay, well, sure, you have all this data, but do I have access to it? And the answer is yes, you have access to ICPSR and NACDA resources. We have, for ICPSR, you do need to be affiliated with a member institution, but ICPSR has more than 800 member institutions. And so we find most secondary researchers have access to member funded data, but the federally funded archives are completely open to the public. You don't need membership affiliation in order to download data from the federally funded archives. We also have self-published data resources. Those are available, and everything's accessible using your Researcher Passport account. And so what we like to say is that if you've navigated ICPSR's site or another ICPSR archive, you can navigate the others seamlessly, and they provide consistent data products. So I'm going to show you some examples of searching from the NACDA homepage. Again, this is nacda-aging.org. And you might notice that it's laid out with a clear search bar and some easy buttons for you to kind of find things or jump to them quickly. If you're doing a search, you can search by keyword, phrase, PI name, related publication, acronym, pretty much whatever you want. There are some tips and tricks on how to search, and I'll get into that. If you're searching by related publications, for instance, the example here is romance, you might notice that sometimes there's a lot of results, sometimes there's not that many results. And the results from the NACDA site are limited to data that are hosted by our archives. So that means they're either funded by the National Institute on Aging or they're in the realm of gerontology in some way. If you want more than data on aging results, you would do the same search from the ICPSR site. I want to highlight our variable view as one of the search options. I think that it's one of the best ways to kind of see the data before you download it and get an idea if that data set's going to meet your needs. So here we have an example from the National Longitudinal Study of Adolescent to Adult Health, also known as AdHealth. And, this variable, ideal romance. You can see the variable view here. It has the variable name, the variable label, and often it will have the question text associated with that variable from the survey that it was, created from. So the question is, what topics did the respondent appear embarrassed about? Ideal romantic relationship. And it looks like most respondents were not embarrassed about this. But what you can also see are the variables that might come before or after the variable that you're looking at right here on the variable page. Again, you don't even have to be logged in to see this. The variable search also allows you to select and compare variables. And here you can see that our search about romance, there are several different variables from different data collections, the family exchanges study, AdHealth appears here again. And, this is only a screenshot, so there are more, but we just can't see them. But you could select these variables and then hit compare, and then it would lead you to a screen where you would see all of the variable level metadata in a stacked view so that you could, see which data set has the variable that's closer to what you're looking to measure. So, some tips about searching NACDA for data resources. If you're searching for relationships, for example, we have approximately 1,300 study results that have this specific term. More than 1,700 related publications with this term in the title, and over 14,000 variables with this term. So relationships covers a very broad range of data that you might find. It would include caregiving relationships, family relationships, partner relationships, maybe even work relationships. But again, that's an example of a very high level way to approach a search. You're going to end up with a lot of results. And if you're searching for one word, you don't need quotes around it. But if you're searching for more than one word, it is a good idea to use the quotation marks, just like an FYI. But if you want to drill down more into what you want to measure when you're searching, try to use specific terms or phrases from a question about a topic. So here I have a search for lovers. You can see much less results, 155 study results, 4 related publications, and over 650 variables. Some other examples, search for ex-wife, ex-husband, again, narrowing down the search. Do these data have the variables you want and need? Search for same-sex and partner, 255 study results. And, sometimes things have searches might produce data that are related to a lot of publications and some don't. And I think that that's a good way for you to tell, is this a new area that you want to explore if it doesn't have a lot of related publications? Or is this a well-known area that maybe you could add to? Okay, for any data from ICPSR or NACDA, you have to be logged into your Researcher Passport account and agree to the terms of use. This is specific to data files, and it's very easy to create a Researcher Passport account, and we don't spam you, and there's no charge to it. So every now and then, if there's some really serious change to a data collection, we might look up who downloaded it and try to contact those people just to let them know, hey, a new version is available. You should really download this new version instead. But that's the most communication you would get from us because you signed up. Okay. So whose data is it anyway? Again, it's everyone's, but in line with thinking about that, I wanted to go through some specific examples of different data collections that NACDA and ICPSR hosts and how they're all kind of maybe slightly different in their availability, but they're all the same in how we display them to the end researcher. So we have here American Changing Lives, also known as ACL. This particular data collection we just updated to include the Wave 6, but it is available as both public and restricted use. So what you're seeing here is an example of our study page, and the At a Glance tab is the default tab for any study page. And we have the Explore Data button, SDA button, Download button, and Access Restricted Data button right at the top. So if you want ACL, you would navigate to the study page and, go over to that Download button and choose which statistical package you want. And then what you would get from here is you would get that data file, all the associated data files with that particular statistical format, as well as the documentation that accompanies those files for the study. If you want to download a specific file instead of the entire study in a format, then you would go and use the Data and Documentation tab. For the ACL restricted data, you would want to navigate to that Access Restricted Data button and follow the data use agreement and the prompts and instructions. Restricted data cannot be downloaded from the site directly, or, and in a lot of cases, we'll send a secure link for some, but some are only available in a virtual data enclave, and ACL is one that's only available in a virtual data enclave. So you'll want to read those directions carefully and make sure that you provide all of the necessary information. And, you can always email us if you have any questions. There's that button just in case you didn't see it. Okay, the wallet study. This is an example of a self-published data on aging collection. So NACDA has a curated workflow, and we have a self-published workflow similar to ICPSR and Open ICPSR. And years ago, after ICPSR adopted Open ICPSR as a method of data sharing, the Aging Archive saw value in having the same functionality for data on aging. We are funded by the National Institute on Aging, but we're a small team and we can't curate everything. And so for data that are in the gerontological field, but maybe not funded by the National Institute on Aging, NACDA OER/Open ICPSR is a great way for you to share your data about aging populations at no cost and be included in the same search results that you would if we curated your collection. So these NACDA OER studies are available and discoverable just like anything else would be from the ICPSR and NACDA sites. So this study, Wealth Accumulations and Later Life Losses in Early Cognitive Transitions, also known as WALLET, this was recently published, and you can see that when you select the study page for a NACDA OER project, the files are listed right there. So you can click on the hyperlink and download them, or you can use the Download This Project button. And we just had a great conversation with Dr. Lichtenberg, the PI of this study, recently, and we are sharing that recorded interview through our YouTube channel, and the link will be in these slides. So you can hear a bit more about the work behind this study. The National Poll on Healthy Aging, this is another example. So everything's, like I said, kind of a little different. We try to treat data sets like the unique butterflies that they are. The NPHA is an example of a series of data hosted by both our curated and our self-published workflows. And most of them are in the NACDA OER now. And this is because, again, we have limited resources. We have to focus our curated mechanisms on NIA-funded data, but we really wanted to support the National Poll on Healthy Aging, and they have a great website with really easy to understand graphics that they've created from the data that they collect. But basically, when you search for NPHA, you will see that all of the waves that are currently available are right on our website to download. And if you select one of those hyperlinks, it will take you to the study page. And again, this is on our NACDA OAR, and you could download the project or you could click on the individual files. This is another example of a series that we reached out to the data team and had a conversation with them, and we recorded it. And so you can listen to our podcast about it, and the link will be in the slides. Okay, NHATS. NHATS is a wonderful resource for data on aging, and it's done at the Institute for Social Research, and ICPSR and NACDA are part of ISR as well. So this example, it reflects an external resource. That means that NHATS hosts their own data, but we try to help make it discoverable from our website. So you will find, if you look for NHATS, that you see a study page for this data resource. But there's a banner across the screen that says this is an external resource, and it provides the link to the NHATS website where you can get the data resources. So if you were to get to this NHATS study page and then click on the link, you would be led to the NHATS site, which you can see here, and you would click on the researchers access, and then you would go to data. And then after registering, you would be allowed to download public data files. NHATS also has a restricted version, and so you would want to refer to their site and directions on how to access those restricted materials. Okay, another example. We have the Puerto Rican Elder Health Conditions Project, also known as PRACO. This series is an example of data that's hosted by different ICPSR archives, or different federally funded archives, but it's a series and the data are all together. This is also an interesting example because there are multiple waves in each study. And so you'll want to navigate to the PRACO series page to conveniently see all the associated studies. And the earlier version or the earlier study of PRACO are hosted by our DSDR archive, also known as the Demography Archive, Data Sharing for Demographic Research. And they're funded by NICHD. And the later study of PRACO is hosted by NACDA because it's funded by NIA. This means something to us and how we internally organize and do this work, but for you, all it means is that the data are freely available because they're both federally funded. You're not going to see any difference in how we distribute these files. So if you would like to download PRACO, you could navigate to the study pages and use the download features that we've displayed in the other slides. Okay, another example. The HALSI study, which is, sorry, let me make sure everything in Zoom is in order. Okay. Health and Aging in Africa, a longitudinal study of an in-depth community in South Africa. HALSI is a great example of data that are available from NACDA and ICPSR and Harvard Dataverse. So what you see here is yet another one of our study pages. No surprises here. It should look like how you expect it to look, with the download features the same as ever. But if you want to know more about the Harvard Dataverse option, we include a link to that in the project description section of the study page for HALSI. So you can see here, we have a pop-up that highlights this note about this. And why would we do that? We do that because we want data available, accessible, discoverable to everyone. And we want to work with data partners who are also sharing that same mission. So if you go to the HALSI site, you might notice it's disseminated a little differently than how it might be at NACDA and ICPSR. And the biggest difference that I could tell was that we have a longitudinal file for Halsey. It includes all 3 waves that are currently available, and it's only the public use data. But if you try to access the data from Harvard Dataverse, you might notice that it's available by each wave in a file and also by cohort or supplement. And I do think they have some restricted data that you could access from here as well. We did do a webinar with the Halsey data team in the past, and it was recorded and it's available on our YouTube. So if you want to find out more about Halsey and what a rich data resource it is, I think you should really check out that recording. Okay, so I've said a couple times that all of these data are different resources that have some uniqueness to them, but I'm trying to convey the similarities that they all get from being ICPSR, data products. And one of the things you'll notice is that for almost all of our collections, we try to create SPSS, SAS, data, and R data file formats, as well as a flat ASCII and setup file. And then we have code books, Excel files sometimes, like CSV, and then like a plain TXT file. So this is true for any curated collection, and really any curated collection beyond, I don't know, our earlier years where we only disseminated data in a flat ASCII file and codebook data dictionary. So this is really applicable to, data beyond the 90s because we had different standards then. Okay, so when you go to download data, you'll notice you get a zip package. And this is because we needed a way to make sure that if someone chooses a single data file or multiple data files, that the package that they get is the same, including all of the documentation and the terms of use. And so a zipped package facilitates that functionality. When you open a zip package, particularly if it has multiple data files, you'll see dataset folders for each dataset and the study level documentation and terms of use outside of those. Now, dataset specific documentation would be in the folders. So now I'm going to take a pause here and give you a summary of the key takeaways of this section. Basically, NACDA is the aging archive, and we host data on aging. All the data we host are for secondary analysis, and sometimes, like NHATs, we might only host metadata in order to aid discoverability. If you're going to remember one thing, I would say it's that even though there's all these different archives that make up ICPSR and different data formats and different access levels, the study pages are the key. They contain similar information across the board about those different collections. And you must be a registered user and agree to the terms of use to download data. So those are the key takeaways from this section. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about some other things. If you've used the data, or if you're using the data and you want to know how to cite the data, you can grab that from the study page. No surprise there, the citation is outlined for you. Say you've used our data and you want to be part of helping people discover how data are being used, submit your citation to us. You can do this from any study page. There's a link to our bibliography form. You can also email us, email our user support. But yeah, if you are using something like AdHealth and you want to make sure your citation is associated with AdHealth, check out that data related publications tab from the study page and fill out the form. So now I'm going to talk about another way to discover data. And this is our NACDA Collectica portal. If you haven't heard of Collectica, basically it is a tool that you can use for a metadata standard called DDI Lifecycle. And DDI Lifecycle is ideal for longitudinal data. And so Collectica has made these great software and applications to help us use this metadata standard and make longitudinal data more discoverable. If you didn't really get any of that, I'll show you. But basically, the Collectica portal operates outside of our NACDA website, but we have links to it from our site. And so you would need to set up registration and log in independent of your Researcher Passport account. When you get to the NACDA portal homepage, you'll see some details about the goals that we have, as well as some links to some recorded webinars that we've done to help better understand what we're doing with this work. And then you'll see a list of series and studies and cross-series comparisons and multi-series comparisons. And so these are the real bread and butter of this work. We've highlighted broad research topic, NIA-funded longitudinal collections that have really clean metadata, and we've made them available in this portal. And we're doing this because we're trying to show similarities and differences within a series across time, across series. And then also this portal allows for unique data downloads. So you don't have to download whole data files. You can just download the variables that you want. So an example of exploring variables across waves in the portal. So this is a single series, but across time. And I'm using Americans Changing Lives again. So you can see that we have 6 waves. And the way that the Explore feature is set up in the portal is that we've created common conceptual groups. You can think of these as topics on the left-hand side. And our team has looked at the variables and placed them into these conceptual groups or topics, based on the content. And they've actually gone and compared variables across waves to each other. So you know how sometimes in one wave, maybe respondents were asked, about their living situation, and the value set ends up with 4 results. But maybe in the following year, they learned some things and decided they need 5 different results or categories in order to accurately convey the living conditions. Well, those 2 different variables, now harmonization is needed, recodes are needed in order to make sure that they're able to be used together. And so our portal highlights those kinds of similarities and differences. And so what you're seeing here is an example of a conceptual group of relationships, variables that relate to relationships, respondents being asked about their relationships. And I've highlighted relationship with spouse or partner. And you can see there are several variables about this topic. And when you see them appear in the columns for each wave, that means that respondents were consistently asked that question. When they don't appear in those columns and those cells that match up with those rows, that means they weren't asked in those years. So we can also see where it's inconsistent. So if you're wanting to do longitudinal research and you need so many waves of data and you need these specific variables, this is a great way to see that in these studies. So the other thing I want to say is that under each wave, those variables, you'll see a letter. And in this case, the letter is A. Since these are all A, that indicates that that variable's value set didn't change over time. Sometimes you'll see a series and then the different waves and then the variables with their values having like A, B, C, D. That means that those value sets slightly changed over those different wave time points. So the other thing about the portal is that you can download custom data sets and documentation. Here, I selected some variables from the National Social Life Health and Aging Project, also known as NSHAP study. And I went to my basket in the portal, and I have the option to download data or metadata. If you're going to download specific data, specific variables, you can get a CSV or an SPSS file. If you're going to download documentation, you would get PDF, CSV, Excel, or XML. So I talked about comparisons across waves in a single series, we also use the portal to explore and compare variables across different series. So the example that you see here is how we compared the National Social Life Health and Aging Project, NSHAP, to the Midlife in the United States study, MIDAS. And again, I've highlighted relationship as the conceptual group. And, you know, we have relationship with spouse or partner. And we can see that in NSHAP and MIDAS, they're asking similar questions, but not the same question. And what we've done is we've compared these and made it clear for you to have that shortcut. So you'll see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's an item name and it says how happy is was relationship. And then there's like a little eye icon that says comparability, need harmonization. This means that we looked at this variable, the variables that were available in NSHAP, and the variables that were available in MIDAS, related the questions to those variables and said, well, how similar are these? So in NSHAP, they were asked how happy was the relationship. And then in MIDAS, respondents were asked to rate current marriage or relationship. These are very similar questions, but they're slightly different. And so our team marked the comparability as needs harmonization. That just means that if someone were going to use these two series together, they need to do a little bit of recode work in order to make that happen. We do come across different series that have variables that are directly comparable or not really very comparable, only comparable in topic really. And you can find out more information about that by selecting the cross-series comparisons information tab in the portal. Another feature that we work on are multi-series comparisons. And the example we have of that right now in the portal, it doesn't, it requires scrolling across the screen, so it's really not great for a PowerPoint slide. So I just tried to summarize it here. But our multi-series comparison, we call it a concordance. It uses the Health and Retirement Series, HRS, as a baseline. And you might know that HRS is a huge, well-known aging study, longitudinal study, also done at ISR. And we don't host those data at NACDA. They host their own data. But again, we want to make them discoverable. We want people to know about HRS. So we worked with the HRS team to identify some variables and questions about cognition and physical health and mental health. And we compared select variables and sections of the HRS survey to a variety of other longitudinal series. And they're all listed here. Some of these same ones I've talked about, Midlife United States, MIDAS, NSHAP, and so on. And we're always adding to this and updating the portal because a lot of these series that I've showed you are active data collections. They're not done yet. So they always have updates that we have to apply. So how you can think of the portal, the main takeaway is that this Explore feature has concepts or conceptual variable groups, and that means convenient exploring for you across longitudinal series and studies. This example here, you see the study of women's health across the nation, the SWAN series, and we have up through visit 10 of SWAN. We would love to get the more recent visits, but I think that you have to visit the SWAN website to get those more recent visits. But anyway, this is a great way to get familiar with SWAN. And you'll see that we have on the left-hand side, those topics or conceptual variable groups. Under item name, those are the conceptual variables. So those basically are our way of saying, okay, the actual variables in the data kind of all fall under the same theme, right? If you look again at the letters of the actual variables in the different time points, that indicates whether or not the value sets changed over time. And then those actual variables that are in the cells of this table, those are the instance variables from the data. If you're wondering how do you find the portal, just get to the NACDA site, nacda-aging.org, and we have a button for it right on our homepage. And so it's pretty easy. Our homepage also has the feature where you can subscribe to our newsletter. We send out a quarterly newsletter and let people know about recent data releases and events that are coming up, like the Population Association of America conference, and we'll be exhibiting there in April. And so, yeah, just get to the NACDA site and our homepage, and you can get to the portal and to any studies you want to download, all of the studies that I've highlighted. And all of those studies that I went through the specific examples, I think are part of our adopted data set activity this week. So check it out. And now you have all the steps you need to download those data. And then again, there's our Collectica portal. We just circled it. And I mentioned we have a lot of YouTube resources. ICPSR has its own channel, and NACDA has a playlist as part of the ICPSR channel. And this is where you'll find past webinar recordings. This webinar recording will be posted there. All of those researcher interviews I mentioned, and even some directions on how to navigate some of those older data formats that I mentioned. So like if you run into an older data set with a flat ASCII file and a codebook data dictionary, it talks a little bit about that. We have a couple videos that talk about creating the syntax file so that you can run it. If you have any questions, you can email our data user support, icpsr-help@umich.edu, and we will respond. A real person will respond and try to help you get what you need. And now, here's our QR code to our link tree. You'll have access to all of the great links, the NACDA site, the portal, our YouTube playlists, our newsletter sign up, and a bit about NIH data sharing resources. This has been a pretty prominent topic over the last couple of years since they implemented the new data sharing policy. And yes, you can email user support about questions about that. And now I'm going to stop and check the chat and open up questions. Okay.
So it looks like we have a few questions in the chat already, but feel free to keep putting them in. The first question is, what is the key difference between the portal and the NACDA site?
Thank you. Okay. So the key difference between the portal and the NACDA site, sheer quantity is one thing. The NACDA site, we host data from, I want to say over 1,600 different studies. And those include studies that are funded by the National Institute on Aging, but also studies that are about aging that might be funded by a different institution. So they might be hosted by one of the other ICPSR archives. And we call it cross-listing. So anyway, you'll find much more on the NACDA site. The portal is still pretty young, and we select specific longitudinal NIA-funded collections that we think will work well for comparability in the portal. The other key difference is that if you want the whole picture of a data set, if you want the whole data set and all the accompanying documentation, using the NACDA site is the way to go. If you just want a little bit of the data, like some custom data sets or metadata, then the portal is the way to go. But they both require registration, and they both have terms of use to agree to. And so they're similar in that way, and they're both about aging. But yeah, thank you for that question. It looks like somebody has their hand raised, but again, for privacy reasons, we have the audience muted, both video and audio. So if you'd like to type your question in the chat, please feel free, or you could put it in the Q&A panel.
Another question we got was, can you clarify the difference between how NACDA provides policy versus how Dataverse provides it?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So Halsey is available from the NACDA site as a single longitudinal data file with all 3 waves in one. And then all of the accompanying data documentation from that research team. The Harvard Dataverse site, from what I could tell, had the Halsey data, but it was broken up by wave. So you would have to download each file. And they also had some additional cohorts, like specific cohorts, like Tanzania we saw, and then some, it looked to me like they had some maybe different bio or physical measure supplements available. And I do think, I did not look into this, but I do think that if you were interested in restricted data, that you would want to start there. Thank you. Okay. Again, please feel free to use the Q&A panel if you have questions, or feel free to share your question with us in the chat. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to put our Linktree link in the chat so everyone can access it in case you want that. That was the slide that we just closed. So just one second. Here we go. Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Yes, we have one more about someone is wondering about the cost association with the data. Are all the data free to use?
Okay, great. Yes. For the most part, yes. Since NACDA is funded by NIA, that means that the service that we provide are supported by NIA. So it wouldn't cost the end researcher anything to access our public use data. For some restricted data, there is a cost, an out-of-pocket cost. It's rare, but it does happen from time to time. And this is because restricted data sometimes requires barriers that have costs outside of our normal functionality for public use data, and just supporting them, sometimes that cost is passed on to the end researcher. If you run into a restricted study that has this condition, then it would be clearly outlined through the process of applying for those data. Like I said, it's uncommon. The majority of our data are available for public use, and even our restricted data, the majority of them are available at no cost. So yeah, for the most part, we like to say it's free, but people might run into some special collections that they have slightly different needs that cost money. Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for your questions. It looks like we're going to end a little bit early, a little bit before the end of the hour. And if you have any more questions or thoughts after, feel free to email our user support. And again, thank you everyone for being here. And I hope that you adopt a data set, a NACDA data set, hopefully one of the ones that I highlighted, and enjoy the rest of the week of Love Data Week. Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Okay.